There's been a lot of hype surrounding remakes as of late, from Nintendo's unexpected success with the Link's Awakening remake, to Resident Evil's 2 Game of the Year nomination at the Game Awards, to the Final Fantasy VII remake spanning multiple entries. Whether simple remasters or deep reimaginings, developers are reaching back to their past gems and giving them a good old polish now more than ever. But how do you define a remake? In truth, remakes are all in the eye of the beholder. To one developer, a remake should transform their beloved masterpiece into a modern, polished version. But to another, a remake should never change the formula and gameplay that to them holds up years later, and instead should focus on upscaling the graphics. However, therein lies the problem. The idea of a remake is not quite the same for each person. Yet despite that subjectivity, remakes tend to be categorized into 3 types among the gaming community: remaster, remake, and reimagining. Although I guarantee you publishers and even some developers don't care about these categories, aside from marketing. Using the all-encompassing term remake is definitely a marketing term. So where does Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition fall in the remake realm? A remake is a remake? You don't need to be specific about it. Whether the Switch version is a remake or a remaster doesn't matter. Normally I would agree with you, other voice in my head, but this is less about trying to correct mislabeling a game and more about understanding the differences and nuances between the original and the Definitive Edition. In other words, is Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition a remaster of the original or a remake? First, let's determine the difference between the 3. A remaster is taking the code and engine from an already released game, up-resing the graphics, and improving or adding some gameplay elements here and there. The story remains relatively the same, but sometimes the developer will add new content to flesh the narrative out. Usually, the art style does not change. Usually. You could almost consider this an HD port. A good example of this are Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD. They have their improvements here and there, but are more or less up-res ports. That said, let it be known that I cannot go back to the originals. I much prefer the HD versions. A remake is rebuilding a game from the ground up in a new engine, usually with a more modern art style and UI. The story can change, but usually stays the same. Gameplay is also touched on, but remains loyal to the vision of the original. The Zelda series gives another good example of this, Link's Awakening. While the Switch remake faithfully recreates the original map and dungeon design, the game is entirely remade from the ground up, with a new art style and modern additions to the gameplay. A reimagining takes the original game and revamps it entirely with a more modern design and gameplay. It basically becomes an entirely new game, separate from the original. The story can be heavily changed depending on the title, or is revamped in some way, usually for the sake of clarity. A good example of this is Final Fantasy VII Remake. Instead of keeping the gameplay turn-based, FF7 Remake takes a more Kingdom Hearts approach to the combat, while also adding key features from the original's gameplay. The overall pacing also slows down as the scale has been magnified by 100, allowing the developers to expand on certain plot points and give some characters a little more room to shine. Hopefully that clears up the different kinds of remakes you can find, but even then, there are some games I would say fall in the middle. Feel free to let me know your own thoughts in the comments below. So what category does the Xenoblade Remake fall into? I've touched on this a little bit in my first Xenoblade Switch video, so please check that out as well when you have the time. First off, the title might be a bit misleading to first-time players, or even players who aren't in the Nintendo news loop. If you're one of those people, welcome to my channel. The term Definitive Edition, when used with other titles, implies porting an older game to a newer console, adding all previous DLC and expansions, and basically creating the best version of the game, instead of remaking the game from the ground up. But make no mistake, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is being rebuilt in a new engine, albeit the engine from Torn of the Golden Country. Granted, I'm sure most of the assets are borrowed from the original, and the environments and cutscenes are practically one-to-one, but Monolith Soft is known for going the extra mile in their projects. Perfectly recreating environments and reanimating cutscenes is not out of their expertise, although resolution still seems to be a problem for their ambitious Switch titles. The greatest difference, however, between the original and this remake are the character models. Clearly, the style has changed to meet halfway down the middle between the original Xenoblade design and the design of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. While there are those purists out there who vehemently despise the more generic anime style of the sequel and subsequently the remake, you can't deny the much higher quality and the better facial expressions associated with these new models. Besides, having an arguably more generic art style does not mean it's bad, just like having a more unique style does not make it automatically good. Yeah, well, it doesn't mean it's good either. Exactly right. It's all in the execution. And when you compare the two styles side by side, it's obvious which is the better one, at least to me. Candy for the eyes, stabbing my eyes with pins. Melts your heart, freezes in an instant. Chills down your spine, replaced with awkward silence. Warm, fluttery butterflies. I think I'm gonna throw up. Have I made my point? Okay, I'm exaggerating a bit with the old style. It's not horrendous. In fact, I still enjoy it. But when compared to these updated models and modern art style, the original doesn't hold up to current 2020 trends. Unfortunately, we mostly have the Wii to thank for that. Well, that's your opinion! I, for one, prefer the original style! Hey man, that's fine. You're allowed to like what you like. But let's not let our biases and nostalgia take away from the work that is being done here. It's also important to note that executive director of the series, Tetsuya Takahashi, has said in a recent article that the Switch version is closer to his original vision for the game, hence the add-on Definitive Edition. Although I don't think the story Future Connected was part of the original design. Honestly, it could just be PR talk. Either way, if Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition was the version they had envisioned all along, then who are we to scoff at that? But of course, you're free to feel the way you want. I feel like I have to say that every time because someone is always going to be like, how dare you tell me how to feel? And I'm like, no, man, I'm just saying, let's be reasonable about this. But anyway. Beyond the character models, the environments have also been improved, albeit without redesigning the environments. Here's where I can see the case for Remaster the strongest. In some cases, it does look like they just up-res the original game. However, like I said before, Monolith Soft is probably using the Torna engine for this remake, meaning they would need to rebuild some of these assets. Granted, I'm sure most of the environments are borrowed from the old engine, and then the details are built around that. But to be fair, I'm not an expert in game development or anything whatsoever, so maybe they did rebuild it all from scratch, but I find that unlikely. But whether Monolith Soft built it all from scratch or not, you can't deny how great these environments look, even in 720p resolution. The areas in Xenoblade are fuller than ever, abounding in environmental details the original lacked. The lighting is improved, the textures are more defined, and the waifus are perfected. Recognizing all of these visual improvements makes it difficult for me to nail it as a remaster. Speaking of improvements, Takahashi and his team are bringing many of the quality of life improvements they added in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 to the first game through the Definitive Edition. No pawn arc stage challenges, level adjusting, sound adjusting, cutscene theater, and more. To me, it's great to see Monolith Soft streamline the original and give the series more synergy as they prepare for Xenoblade to become a bigger franchise for Nintendo. Another improvement we cannot dismiss is the OST. I know there are those who love the original, similar to the art style purists of the original, but these remastered tracks are so good. They're so much better. The quality is crisp and clear, matching the new tone of the Definitive Edition perfectly. Unfortunately, it's not all orchestrated, but considering the tracks we've heard so far and the current state of the world, I'm completely fine with the work they've done. Lastly, we have to look at the story. Let's be frank, it's gonna stay the same in the main game. No changes to bridge the gap with other Xenoblade games, although Xenoblade Chronicles 2 does a fine job of that already. Honestly, I'm pretty happy they're leaving the story as is. A masterpiece of a story doesn't need new filler beyond minor tweaks. I mean, the game is more than 80 hours already. I think we'll be fine. However, it is confirmed that the added epilogue, Future Connected, will affect the future of the series in some way. We'll just have to play it and find out for ourselves what that is. If you want to know my theories about that, please see my Battle for Shulk video. Taking all these points into consideration, and based on the definitions we established earlier, I personally believe Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition to be in between a remaster and a remake. I know that's kind of the easy way out, but hear me out. Of the two, I feel more comfortable calling it a remaster, although I didn't think that way 2 weeks ago. I started referring to the Definitive Edition as a remaster after reading Takahashi's comments about the Switch version being closer to his original vision for the game. I don't think you can call a full remake the original vision. It makes more sense to be a remaster in that sense, if that makes any sense. But honestly, no matter what you want to call it, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition will without a doubt be the best way to play one of the greatest JRPGs ever created. At the end of the day, I'm grateful that I can play a game that I adore in HD, something I didn't think would happen for years down the line. Not only that, but I can't wait for so many new fans to experience the journey for the first time. Let's hope they all really feel it. Oh, such an original joke. I haven't heard that one before. Oh wait, I have. Every video. It gets old. It's that one in Rhyme time all the time. Now it's Rhyme time. Wow, I really walked into that one. Regardless, think of something else. Something funny. Come on. There's plenty of other things you can do with Xenoblade. Hiro pon pon apple pon. Yeah, maybe you should just stop. You should just stop doing jokes. No more. Thank you so much for watching! What are your thoughts on remakes? Are you enjoying Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition? Let me know in the comments below. I've been streaming Xenoblade. I streamed it yesterday on release day, and then I'll be streaming it on Saturday today as well. So please check that out if you have the time. My next project is one I've teased for a while. Wish me luck. It's gonna be a big one. I also want to do a Paper Mario The Origami King video eventually, but only time will tell. Be sure to subscribe for more Xenoblade and Nintendo goodness. Goodbye, you good people! I much prefer the HD versions. Virgins. Oh my gosh! Why do I keep saying virgins? Versions!